Couchbase Presents Futureproofing the Data Strategy in association with Moneycontrol.
Hello and welcome to Couchbase Presents Futureproofing the Data Strategy in association with Moneycontrol. I'm Mridu Bhandari. This is a leadership dialogue series where we decode the trends shaping the next decade of digital transformation. Today we are diving into a topic that every CTO, CIO and data leader is thinking about: data modernization in the age of AI. Across industries, from banking and insurance to telecom, retail and digital native companies, the need for modern, flexible and intelligent data architecture has never been more urgent. Legacy systems may have brought us here, but they are not going to take us into the AI-driven future. So the real question is, what does it take to modernize responsibly, strategically, and at scale? And to unpack that with us today, I'm joined by a stellar panel of technology leaders. Let's welcome Nilesh Chaudhary, Head of Technology, Corporate, Commercial and Functions at Kotak Mahindra Bank; Aruj Gopal, Regional Business Leader at Couchbase; Pinak Chakravarti, CIO of Airtel Payments Bank; and Santosh Bhatt, Head of Advanced Technologies at PolicyBazaar. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us here on this special conversation. Aruj, if I may begin with you. Now, you work with enterprises across maturity stages. When a company begins its modernization journey, what patterns or telltale signs do you really observe? And what's your advice for CIOs still deeply invested in legacy systems, but who really would like to modernize?
Sure. Thanks for that. Glad to be a part of this panel. What we see consistently is that modernization really starts as a tech initiative. The conversations are more when we get in. It starts when the business pain actually becomes visible. Well, the first pattern is when the team struggle to change, release cycles slow down. A new regulatory requirement or a new digital product suddenly takes months because the underlying data platform simply can't adapt. The second pattern, I feel performance is utmost critical, today for every organization, for every enterprise today, especially in financial services. Like we talk about peak loads of UPI transactions, we talk about reporting to the RBI timely, or to some of the major regulators, sale, market events, tax filing, etc. And of course, most of the database becomes the bottleneck for revenue. The third sign is, of course, we are introducing. We see many conversations where every enterprise wants to add a new channel. It could be mobile, it could be microservices, real-time analytics, offline experiences, and legacy databases. As we agree, were never built, for that kind of an agility. And many of the conversations today, CIOs today, all the leaders, they're very pragmatic. They know they can't do a big rip and replace. And so what we've understood as, most of the conversations that we do, pick a high impact use case, say about a customer profile or a real-time payments or a fraud check, modernize that on a cloud native, low latency, scalable platform, and, have measurable wins. And, a simple advice is, of course, modernization isn't just about a new database, but it's about a new data experience, where we're talking about sub-millisecond response time, elastic scales, and rapid feature changes without schema delays.
Right, absolutely. It is about creating new data experiences and not just a database. Nilesh, if I may build with you on that now, in your experience, what's the tipping point at which maintaining legacy systems actually becomes more expensive or risky than migrating to a modern architecture?
First of all, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. And just building on the points that Aruj just made, it is the tipping point are when your change, time required to change, and stability start going beyond the point that is acceptable to the business, right? The trick, of course, is that if you are already seeing those, it's already late in terms of those. So you have to look at these as you have to look for leading indicators as opposed to lagging indicators. You should be looking at them more in terms of 2 years down the line or 3 years down the line. That system is going to break, or it is going to go beyond what it was designed to do. So looking at the design components is essential, but in my view, coming back to the point here, is it's the cost of maintenance, the stability, and the time required, the lead time required to put changes into production. There could be changes for regulatory reasons or changes for just meeting business conditions or meeting keeping in space with competition or any of those kind of offerings, right? But legacy, of course, is not something that's 30 years old or 40 years old. You could have legacy as old as a year as well. As soon as you put things into production, it doesn't take too long to become a legacy in that context. So future proofing is really key.
Absolutely. Future proofing is really key, and that's the theme we are on today. Bringing in Pinak as well. Now, Pinak, your story is fascinating because you are running one of the largest distributed banking networks in the country. What does it take to modernize a network of over 5 lakh banking points, many of them in rural areas? What were some of the unique challenges that you had to solve for?
Right. Thanks, Mridu. I hope I'm audible to all of you. As you rightly said, this brings a unique, I would say, challenge and a set of opportunities as well. I'll touch upon the positive thing first. It is easy to start with that. So in terms of opportunities, you see 500K rural touch points that basically bring us unique behavioral and liquidity graph information about how our rural India is utilizing banking. And this also enables, quite a few other very interesting data points. For example, we are able to understand what is our DBT, the direct bank transfer or Jan Dhan distribution in rural India, how people are actually using cash, how they're using digital media, maybe in an assisted mode, and can we then apply some analytics to understand some kind of fraudulent behavior, mule account, etc. Also, can we do some analysis on, let's say, crash replenishment, etc. Right? However, the challenges are many. Right? I'll start with few. One is that if you look at the distribution, there is an extreme distribution of endpoints. So therefore, you cannot assume, unlike in urban India, you cannot assume that everybody will be on 4G or 5G, right? So there will be, kind of a heterogeneous distribution where, we should be able to cater for areas which will have very low network bandwidth and penetration, right? And therefore, we require a design that will almost accept that there will be intermittent network failure. And therefore, we really need to understand how we can recover from this failure and how we can service the customers or the end users, by taking care of those intermittent issues, right? Now, the other point is that the data quality, right? So what we say is that data quality as our first class problem, right? So rural BCs, if you look at it, as I said, they produce heterogeneous data format, sometimes inconsistent data. Many a times people enter data manually, right? And therefore, some of the techniques like, schema on write, automated validation, device level, checking, etc., that we implemented to reduce the garbage in risk, because end of the day, your analytics is dependent on what data is coming into the system. Other important thing, the benefit that I talked about, we'll be able to realize those when we have real-time events almost at a national scale, right? So gone are the days when you have a batch process that will run end of the day, right? Or maybe few hours. So definitely from that, we are now looking into near real time, either in terms of using the technologies like, the streaming first architecture, using some message queues, whether it is Kafka, Kinesis, etc. Right? And also we are looking at how we can not only, take the data, but also push it to our analytical engine in the real time. And lastly, I would say, obviously, some of it I already touched, the questions on the mule account, fraudulent, etc. So how do you actually establish the zero trust, right? So you are not trusting on the basis of a network or an IP, rather you are trusting an identity. and then you are allowing that identity do certain transaction, but not others. We call it RBAC, the role-based authentication, etc. So these are overall, in a nutshell, the challenges and the opportunities. I would like to conclude by saying that the opportunity here is enormous because we are getting, tons of data per minute. If we can utilize those in our architecture, if it allows, then the information or the intelligence that we can gather from it is enormous.
Absolutely. That's well put. Mammoth amount of data being generated there. And you touched upon a bunch of very important points. And I'm going to come to some of those in the course of this conversation. But right now, let me also bring in Santosh from PolicyBazaar. Now, let's look at this from an InsurTech lens. Now, when you think of future-proofing data architecture at PolicyBazaar, what does the future look like? And how do you know that you are really on the right track already?
First of all, thank you for having me. So let's step back. Like when we are talking about future proofing for the insurtech, let's step back and see how the business actually the market is changing, how the business is actually changing, right? That dictates sort of how we deal with modernizing the data architecture and so on, right? So now, if you look at it, basically customers are expecting almost instant claims or basically a straight through processing, or basically the industry is also slowly, it's not actually sort of going on a rapid pace, but we are slowly moving towards customized plans, right, for individuals and so on, right? Now if we were to kind of basically look at how do we actually architect this, the future, basically from a data platform perspective and so on. So one, I think basically everything has to be adaptive and agile I mean, pretty much. And then even the old legacy systems that we have, right? How do I actually, kind of, eventually put us sort of, re-architect it in some ways, right? So can we actually look at something like a data fabric, or, basically like a data mesh or something that can decentralize in some ways? Now, we have moved to, by and large, we have moved to an event-driven architecture that makes us very agile, right? And then the biggest thing that has happened in the last year or so is actually the AI. It so happens that I've been in the AI field for a long time. So now you cannot expect, or rather people expect, AI to be put into the pipelines, and it has to be a part of the AI. I mean, the AI has to be embedded within the entire data platform, right? And then finally, I think all of that we do, right? Basically, it has to be democratized. Like the data platform has to be democratized, whether you're giving it to an actuarial person, or you're giving it to a business analyst, like the non-technical people, all of that. So basically, that's how it looks like. Now, whether we are making, what are the different cues that we're getting, basically, let me put it this way. Like we started this journey about 3 years back. We identified all of these as like, challenges. So, today, almost 100% of the reporting is actually done on our data lake, and the almost near real-time reporting, right? So that's one of the cues. A large portion of basically the AI models have been embedded into the data platform. So basically, data is available to the actuaries, and I mean, basically the underwriting people and so on. Yeah. So those are some of the cues, in a nutshell.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for that. And, you spoke of agility quite a bit. So let's zoom into this architecture for a minute and talk about stability versus agility, because modernization is not just a lift and shift. It is actually a design rethink. So Aruj, what architectural attributes truly make an enterprise data platform future-proof in the AI era? What would be your top three?
See, from I think over the next, from an AI perspective, and thanks, Anag. I think I was very interested. Your Santosh comments around, from a distributed of endpoints, not everybody will be on a 4G, 5G, and I think these are very relevant conversations from a Couchbase, kind of perspective. Now, if there's one thing AI has really taught us, it's that the old and rigid architectures are not, built for what comes next. And AI needs actually a nimble, adaptive data architecture, and architectures that support multiple styles of data processing at the same time. Now, I'll kind of break it up because there are four absolutely critical, components that we really look at. We look at real-time analytics. Everybody's been mentioning about that. We look at caching, low latency, all the conversations that are around that. We're talking about strong, scalable indexing so that data is discoverable instantly rather than we doing a full table scans, literally like we do it in legacy systems. OLTP, of course, extremely important because AI needs to be as latest as, which is there on the user device or transaction. And most enterprises today end up stitching multiple products to achieve these four layers, and that complexity is actually becomes the enemy of an AI agility. Where Couchbase, let me just kind of throw some light over where Couchbase fundamentally differentiates. Is all four are integrated in a single platform. One source of truth, one consistent platform, and performance. For each profile. You get operational data, analytics, you talk about caching, you talk about vector at billion scale, intelligence all working together, right? And the biggest advantage that we bring on the table is developers still use SQL, right? All across in every conversation that I'll make, SQL is one of the biggest capability that we've built. And that's a language that everybody already know it. You can, to query, tune models, operationalize, etc. And that's why we say Couchbase is actually built for a system of intelligence era where data decisions and user experience, kind of must happen in real time. And as is the topic says, to future-proof an AI initiative, we need to modernize towards this unified architecture that having multiple technologies catering to a basic fundamental requirement of an application, which is ever changing and growing.
All right. Well, Nilesh, coming to you with that question now, you probably struggle with this balance daily when modernizing. How do you prioritize stability versus agility, especially in a very, very tightly regulated sector like banking?
Absolutely. Whatever Aruj was saying, and I was just thinking back on exactly that, right? In the just not regulated, it's also banks are in the business of trust primarily. Of course, they're heavily regulated, but that's not really the challenge here. The challenge is we're dealing with other people's money, and therefore stability is of our customers' money, to be precise. The stability is of prime importance there, right? If there is a problem with our platforms and customers are not able to access their investments or their money, that is not acceptable. So there is a key focus on the stability side of things. However, on the agility aspect, and Santosh touched base on some of these points in terms of how you can unlock legacy to emit legacy platforms to emit the right kind of signals, or simple things like change data capture, CDC technologies is what is it's getting the right balance. Of course, you don't want to load legacy platforms. They were never designed for real-time use cases. They're probably designed for the 9 to 5:30 world, which we left behind a long time ago. So we are looking at those aspects to see how we can manage the risk appropriately while being able to get to all the advantages that Arun just spoke about real-time streaming data. Because that's the other aspect of it. If you skew too much on the stability side, you'll end up compromising on capabilities and expectations from your customers, right? So that's key. But so there are multiple aspects to get this balance. One, of course, is using simple, straightforward solutions. The other is the concept of hollowing out, where you take bits and pieces of the legacy platform that, either by design or based on opportunity, kind of re-architect them and plug them into the overall structure, right? But in this new, in the world that we're stepping into with agentic AI and that for all of that, data and real-time data and all of that being together is actually important. You have to be able to relate all those entities. If you have disparate data sources, it's very difficult to get a picture, especially if you need that picture in near real time, to be able to make the right contextual, decision or offer that is best for the customer at that point in time. So it's key that we kind of through this at Kotak we have invested over the last couple of years in building out our data infrastructure and data fabric. And we are well down the journey of actually, getting our legacy platforms and the new ones that we are writing, where we are making sure that all of the data elements come in at design and not like bolt-ons later, to make sure that all those things are emitted and extending that further.
Great, great. Good to know that. Also bringing in Pinak. Pinak, you've often spoken about long-term thinking. So how do you really differentiate between permanent shifts and short-term trends when you are architecting for the future? Because, there will be short-term gains as well that you're looking at from a business perspective, right?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Bridu. I think this is what all of us grapple with, I would say almost every day. But there are certain underlying decision framework or principles that drive our decision in terms of any technology adoption on a longer term. So in the longer term, we are looking at technology that can basically solve what I call 3S, right? And we can add one more S because we are talking about the speed. But the first 3S are as follows. The first one is the stability of the platform. So any technology that is adding to the stability, that is of course welcome. Second is on the scale, right? So the volume of data that is getting ingested, or for any other matter apart from data as well, any technology that you are looking at, that has to be support as the scale, and I would say almost a nationwide scale on a near real-time basis. This is the second S. The third S is of course the security, right? So digital payment ecosystem in general is under a lot of stress because of security concerns, etc. And therefore, the third S is the security, which any technology that you are bringing in that must be able to resolve, right? And the fourth S, I think in the overall discussion, we are talking about the speed of delivery, right? So when we adopt any new technology, we apply these principles and we say that we see that in the longer run, they are able to achieve those three objectives plus the fourth one. And there are certain ways that worked good for us. So what I call is that pilot widely. That is when we are looking at a technology, we include almost all the use cases possible, obviously to a limited extent. Then when we adopt it narrowly. So we do not expose the technology to the entire bank's platform, and then we increment. Basically, we expand incrementally. So basically, pilot widely, adopt narrowly, and then expand incrementally, right? Now, coming back to the short-term trends. So there are certain short-term trends we always see building in the industry, right? So you would remember there are discussion about, Web 3.0, etc., blockchain, right? Now, those technologies, of course, we all did POC, including us. But in terms of the business usage, I would say that it has been slightly limited in nature, right? Now everybody is talking about AI, but application of AI without the proper governance or the risk framework can become a disaster, right? So these are the certain trends that I'm saying, we need to be careful of. We need to experiment so that we know to what extent it can support us. But before we implement, you remember I said that, adopt narrowly. So in that phase, we will evaluate that what trend is able to serve us the qualifying principles that we have established, right? So if you ask me about the long-term standing, some of it I think was highlighted by this panel. So we look at the near real-time event streaming based system that can support us almost like petadata level of scale, or which in other ways you can think about the nationwide scale, right? And some of the permanent shift that I see is basically, let's say, elastic compute, right? So because of the seasonality of the business, there will be data ingestion that sometimes increases, sometimes decreases, right? So elastic compute is definitely a permanent trend. Now you can argue whether only cloud can deliver or you can build it within your data center. That is, of course, depends on what is the policy on the hybrid cloud, etc. But elastic compute as a design pattern will definitely stay. The other thing is the zero trust, right? Because you mentioned in the last question about this 500,000 BC points, right, in real India. So identity as the new perimeter, right? So there is no perimeter as such, your network boundary. Identity itself becomes perimeter. And then the last point I will mention is the regulation, right? So regulation should become our first thinking, because we all know there are a lot of regulations on RBI. Now this DPDP Act is coming. As a bank, we are subjected to various types of audits. So regulation should be built as a part of any technology adoption. So I think I'll stop here and hand it over to you, Vidhu.
Thank you for those wonderful insights, and I love the 4S framework that you just shared: stability, scale, security, and adding speed to that. Thank you so much for sharing that. Well, Santosh, coming to you now, how do you keep your architecture agile and agile enough to support rapid innovation while also maintaining stability for very, very high volume regulated transactions?
So I think let me just add on to what Pinak said, right? I think there was a great framework having the 4S kind of a framework, right? So stability and essentially the regulations kind of overrule everything else per se, right? In the fintech or the financial domain. So what we try to do is, like, if you basically lay out a strategy, if you're trying to bring agility to the system, you're actually looking at best fit kind of a technology, all different sets of technologies, which will actually kind of and for it can depend on each of the use case based, which is like kind of shallow kind of area, right? So you could basically look at that approach and eventually build on, right? However, essentially there will be a strong layer of governance as well as basically the regulatory framework that will actually have to get baked in. So every single technology that actually is basically being tested will have to go through that layer.
Right, absolutely. Well, all right, then let's shift gears a little bit and let's talk about integration now, because every enterprise today is dealing with data sprawl. So Aruj, coming to you first, what should organizations prioritize first when modernizing? Should it be use cases? Should it be governance? Should it be the data platform itself?
Well, actually, it's a bit short, but yes, I believe modernization must be use case led, not infrastructure led. You start with the business objective, and it could be anything. It could be faster onboarding, it could be better fraud detection, it could be hyper personalized offers, as we've all been, trying to achieve that, and in a much better way as well. It could be branchless banking, right? Every bank wants to reach 2 tier 3 tier 4 rural markets. You need to be there as well, right? So when the use case is clear, the data requirements actually become clear, and that informs like governance, as Santosh and the entire panel has mentioned. We're talking about compliances, we're talking about platform design. So the not so idle approach is, let's build a data platform and then find a use case, as we all agree, I'm sure. And because that creates a shelfware, and start where the customer value is greatest, then design the architecture, governance into the solution, not as an afterthought. And when you deliver one strong win, the momentum builds within the team, and the modernization becomes unstoppable, because you've actually created a link between legacy and in the newer age modern databases, and so how to deal with that and move ahead with it. And that's why Couchbase is gaining momentum, right? Because we allow, and we are helping organizations start with a single journey. We're not in a favor of doing a rip and replace. We don't come with that strategy. You talk about customer 360, which leads you to real-time personalization. You talk about offline first onboarding, remote markets, addressing the remote markets, low latency payment, etc. So scale success, as we mentioned during our conversation, it's is re-architecting or adding new it's not always the right thing to just re-architect it every time and adding a new database every time. You can scale success across more use cases once you land one, and then that database is capable enough to expand into many other use cases. And that's why Couchbase is kind of has an important share today in the market.
Right, absolutely. Well, Nilesh, continuing on that thread, how important is having a unified data platform, combining operational and analytical workloads versus multiple specialized databases?
So, there is a balance to be had in terms of the speed at which you need to put your use cases through. I totally agree with Aruj's point that all of these things need to be largely use case led, right? But you can also identify things that are, we would say what we call no regrets work, right? That sets foundational elements together on which you can build. So you can have a hockey stick kind of a curve when adoption comes in, and you can actually leapfrog in that particular area, right? Now, so that's the balance to be had, right? In terms of it's clear that you need to have a unified, data capability, because you have to be able to link all your various business aspects or business elements in that data together to make sense out of it, right? Having very singular things, they may make sense in some use cases, but it also means that you may end up getting locked in with some of those elements, especially if they are black boxes that you are building in, right? So in our case, we are investing heavily in engineering capabilities, building engineering capabilities in terms of talent and people. And a lot of our, and we have very rigid, not rigid, but very elaborate process of ensuring that we take the right build versus buy decisions. So we want to focus that engineering muscle that we've invested in to actually, help us create the differentiators. Whereas, what you would tag as a commodity, we would essentially take that. We could take a call to take that with a partner. Right, but the key element there is these are interchangeable things between commodity and differentiators. So you have to take a long-term view, as Pinat was saying, in terms of design principles. Effectively, actually putting all the data in one place is essential. You need to be able to take those case-by-case calls on how you build versus buy, and avoid any lock-ins where your data is sitting somewhere else and you can't get out of it 2 or 3 years down the line.
Fair enough. Okay. Pinak, bringing you in as well, your world is all about collaboration in a fast evolving open banking ecosystem now. How do you design for future interoperability, and what are some of the challenges that has thrown up for you?
Yeah, so you are absolutely correct in saying that, a bank or a payment bank like us, we definitely collaborate with multiple partners other than the organizations like NPCI, UIDI that everybody does. But we have a lot of other partners to help us in our goal of achieving financial inclusion almost in India, right? So there are partners on, for example, the domestic money transfer, then our cash management system. So there are certain design principles that we follow, which makes it possible for our ecosystem to be connected with the new partners without any friction or without less friction. Less friction is possibly correct instead of saying no friction at all. So one is that obviously we look at API first architecture. So any of our ecosystem or any of our systems or the data that is not exposed through even in our internal ecosystem or outside, apart from APIs. So APIs are the doorways to our system through which we actually collaborate, and API does not come as an afterthought. So we start with API definition. So every internal data asset, if you look at, it will have an API which will be governed, right? Governed meaning what is the definition of the API payload, what kind of data we are sharing, etc. Right? So this is one important aspect that actually help us, and then versioning of those APIs, the security aspects of the APIs, etc. Right? And of course, as I said, APIs is in the compute layer. That will be segregated from our storage layer. So one design principle that we follow is that our storage layer and compute are kind of segregated or modular, and hence if we have to change the storage layer for better scalability, etc., let's say moving from X database vendor to Y, our compute layer can still remain the same, right? So for the external partners, their interface most possibly would not change. They would not see any, they would not be requiring to do any new integration. They actually would not be feeling anything. It will be completely transparent, apart from possibly feeling that it is now become more responsive, etc. If we are able to, change it, right? Now, there are certain very interesting problems that happens, right, because of the interoperability, right? So, though I mentioned there is a centralized metadata or API, almost like a registry, that obviously makes it easier for us to understand what does it mean, what does a particular field means. But when it goes to across organization, there are certain semantic drift, right, that might happen. What I mean by semantic drift is that what we mean by dormancy, that definition may be different across, let's say, NBFCs or in the bank, right? So there might be a dormancy flag in our API payload. Interpretation of it, or what you call as a dormancy or a dormant account, might become different, right? So there might be a semantic drift happen if you are not really careful. And then data lineage, right? So unless we are very careful, because data is now getting updated by multiple partners, so there could be a drift in the data lineage, as well. So therefore, understanding and having an observability on how the data is changing, right? And DPDP Act, by the way, will possibly kind of mandate it that we should do it, right? We will be required to do it by law. But even without that, if we need to understand how this particular data state has changed, so that observability we need to build in, and again, it cannot be after the fact, right? So it has to be built in within the design. And the last point, as I said, this is my favorite point, that compliance and regulation, right? When you are sharing data or consuming the data, so compliance has to be built by design. And again, it cannot be after fact, right? And when I say compliance, I also included my third S, which is the security. So how do you tokenize the data? How you are providing access through multiple channels? Because if you look at my first point, I said we cannot assume like our urban population, right? Our rural India may not be, everybody may not be in 3G. There are 2Gs,
Yeah.
etc. They can be accessing the data through a different form factor. They can be accessing data through, let's say, feature phone, not even smartphone. So all these aspects needs to be built in on our compute layer. Storage layer can be transparent to that, but all sharing is happening from the compute layer through the API, and therefore we are able to minimize the friction, as I said, not completely eliminate it.
Right, and absolutely rightly said that security and compliance cannot be afterthoughts. They have to be really at the core of the digital DNA of an enterprise. Santosh, coming to you now, in the insurance world, data variety is really exploding. How effective are flexible NoSQL models in enabling machine learning initiatives that are often built on diverse and very rapidly evolving data sources?
So, see, I think as a data, if you look at essentially the set of data scientists in my team, all of them are actually working on all unstructured data, right? In most of the cases, and I think it's predominantly 90% unstructured data versus basically the very little structured data that actually we work with. Now, the NoSQL databases is essentially the way forward, the way I see it, right? Now, they are pretty effective in the sense that, one, there is a high read-write capability with with the NoSQL kind of, databases. Then you basically, you make yourself flexible by using some of these NoSQL databases, basically because it can be limited schema or basically a completely schemaless, right? So, and in real-time analytics and so on, this actually becomes it's a big boon in some ways. So in many ways, I think in terms of, agility, whether it is, velocity or even the diversity, basically, I believe that, NoSQL databases or technologies are the way forward. And we are actually, like, I think most of us are on that actually right now.
Absolutely. All right, then let's get into the AI readiness piece now, because architecture is only as useful as the intelligence that it can unlock. So Aruj, if I may come to you, edge computing is a big part of Couchbase's story. What new operational models are emerging because of mobile and edge capabilities, especially in customer facing businesses? Can you share a few examples with us?
Sure, Mrida. And I did hear Pinak did mention about data quality, and of course not everyone will be on a 4G, 5G, so we should be able to cater to low network bandwidth areas where network is available, or people are able to do some kind of a transaction or operation there. So we all understand that next era of customer experience is definitely offline. First, your service quality should no longer actually be dependent on your connectivity quality, and that actually unlocks a lot of new ways to serve customers. It's definitely it's faster, smarter. There is no interruption. A mobile banking app must work even in low connectivity scenarios. As we mentioned, rural banking, people are moving into rural areas trying to ensure that they're able to transact or make some sort of an operation. An insurance agent should be able to issue a policy even in remote areas. A delivery rider should be able to complete the journey even without a 4G, right? So Couchbase Mobile actually enables a full local capability with secure sync when the device reconnects. Again, it's one of the most prominent features that Couchbase has. It's a built-in mobile database. And this unlocks entirely new business models. It could be payment experiences. It is embedded insurance at the point of sale. It could be telco field service, where people are working on field. They don't have network, but they're still able to interact between peer-to-peer, etc. So it moves the compute and data closer to the customer, reducing latency and, of course, dependency on central servers, and, of course, leading to more revenue for the customer, of course, less drop-off and significantly higher trust. And that is very powerful differentiator for us in India, where the next 300 million digital users live in an inconsistent network. And I'll give you a few examples here. Ryanair, of course, uses Couchbase Mobile to optimize the management of semi-static data like seating maps, and airport information. And within their app, it's leading to a 60% faster booking process and 87% less data transfer that's happening. Another quick example that I want to close my conversation with is PepsiCo, right? They've deployed an offline available solution for 30,000 field sales representatives globally, allowing them to manage sales functions, place orders, merchandise stores without even an internet connection. So data captured in the field on the embedded Couchbase Lite automatically syncs to the server when connectivity is available. Mrida.
All right. Well, very, very interesting use cases there. Nilesh, coming to you now. When you look at a modernization roadmap, what must a modern architecture deliver to support AI, microservices, and cloud or edge deployment?
Yeah, I think the challenges that both Pinaki and Anuj brought out are the same that we experience with especially with certain parts of our businesses to do with the microfinance and the agri and SME business. Exactly the same challenges in terms of the heterogeneous nature of data and how customers might access us. So edge computing is a big thing. We are, our new mobile app, which we are working on, is actually employing some of the principles that Arun just spoke about. Even for banking, money movement standpoint, where you're able to transact, you're able to see your balances, and we are also able to take out some amount of our, or we get to a stage where we're able to take some amount of central processing off to edge devices. So that is clearly, the future. And from a architecture standpoint, we already spoke about real-time data. So while we have our data fabric, as I said earlier, we are now in the right in the middle, in fact, of seeing how that can become real time in terms of the ingestion as opposed to T+1, whether it is the assisted journeys that our RMs need to use, or telling the RM in real time what is the best path to follow when servicing customers on whatever journey they are doing, right? So that's one part in terms of the real-time data. We spoke about microservices earlier as well. I think it was Pinak who brought that out in terms of an API-first architecture. That's the second point in my view in terms of being able to have the right you would say the enterprise framework across or bank-wide or a firm-wide, enterprise-wide framework that allows these services to connect with each other, right? And the semantic part is very important. For example, if you look at an identity document, you want all your systems to recognize that identity document in the same way, right? Or take a payment, instruction. The world has now moved on, and India had led the charge in terms of ISO 222 formats. That is not, it is tabular, but it can be recursive all as well. So how do you design a payment document that is consistently recognized by all the components in your architecture? So that homogeneity is actually bringing that element in so that you can quickly build solutions, whether they are AI use cases or they are use cases, regular use cases for servicing customers or enabling your feet on street. Those are key as well. We've set up a platform engineering team that is building some of these what we call technology primitives that we can quickly bring to bear and define our architecture principles. So we can deliver, the line of business technology teams can deliver far better, consistent solutions across that speed.
All right, wonderful to know that. Santosh, now there's a shift from product-driven models to dynamic AI-driven service offerings, or what is termed as servitization in your industry. Now, do you see this fundamentally changing how the insurance sector operates in the future? What's your take on that?
I think it's sort of taking its shape right now. Let's take some of the use cases, right? Like, for example, pay as you go, right? Pay as you drive is what is called, I think. So that's one use case where actually people don't have to pay for, just one premium for the entire year. Instead, they can actually kind of, pay as much as they drive. Now, for that, there is a bunch of AI models that are actually developed to kind of assess the premium and so on and so forth. That's already happening. That's one. Now, the second area that where AI based offerings are coming into play is actually in the health insurance space, right? Like, for example, if you basically upload some of your either your health data or your fitness data and so on, you actually tend to get better discounts and so on, right? So these are just some of the examples. The way I see it is, eventually everything will be very customized, maybe a few years down the line, but that's how the world is actually moving. That's how it will go to go.
All right. Well, let's spend a quick few minutes before we wrap up on governance and regulation and compliance, because no modernization story is really complete without the governance conversation. Many of you brought it up during the course of the last hour, especially when it comes to regulated sectors. So, Pinak, if I can bring you in, inclusivity and governance often pull in very different directions. So how do you strike this balance while serving millions of Indians nationwide?
Yeah, so thanks, Mridu. Another great question. In terms of inclusivity, if you look at, I think we already touched upon quite a bit on this. So this depends on which market segment we are servicing, right? So Airtel Payments Bank, one of the primary goal is financial inclusion, and hence we cannot avoid, or rather we really want to serve rural India, and therefore we cannot really avoid heterogeneous network connectivity, data sources, etc. So inclusivity there means that we are able to reduce friction, if not making it zero, but making it absolutely minimum, so that there is no problem for our user bases, who are, by the way, most possibly using banking, a formal banking, for the first time, right, in their career. And in fact, I dare say, in fact, their entire family, right, possibly they are using for the first time the formal banking. So therefore, things like that, the offline first, or at least if it's not completely offline, how it will work in a low network area, right? Lightweight device requirements. We cannot really assume everybody will be on the latest and greatest on iPhone or Android. And then supporting for the local language or the vernacular vernacular medium in UI. So in Airtel Payment Bank, we support Hindi and some other Indian languages. Of course, we are gradually expanding, right? But on the compliance side, this has to be paired with very strong identity binding, right? And the trails and the app attestations, right? So whether it is other enabled device binding or SIM binding, ability for us to understand the transactional pattern and detecting anomalies, those are the things remain absolutely crucial, right? And then data classification, etc., and ingestion. So some of the regulations or otherwise, when you are ingesting the data in your data pipeline itself, what are the checks and balances? So, for example, if it is other data, are we masking the other data at store, or even the other data when it is transmitting through the network? Are we careful enough to mask it in a manner that a man in the middle attack will not be able to utilize it for the malicious intent, and so on and so forth, right? So I would say, if we look at this as a design requirement, right, this set of compliance, whether it is identity or protecting of the customer interest in terms of data. Now DPDP Act will bring in further complexities and the inclusivity, right? On the other hand, you are supposed to have a device which would not be latest and greatest, etc., right? If we combine all these in a design requirement from the very inception of your design process itself, then most possibly it becomes easier, right? Easier than applying those governance control later.
Right. All right. Aruj, now, what are some of the big misconceptions about moving from legacy to NoSQL, and what's really the reality? And I want you to look at this from the lens of governance, compliance, security.
Sure, sure. So, I mean, there are three big misconceptions that I practically understand while we've been meeting, enterprises today. Uh, Myth one, of course, could be, NoSQL isn't an enterprise grade, but the reality is very different. Some of the most regulated institutions, financial, travel, telco, they run mission critical operations on NoSQL today. Of course, catering and abiding to all the compliances and regulations that are in place, which every enterprise caters to. Uh, NoSQL means no SQL. A big myth. People do think that they'll have to learn everything from scratch, everything new. But with Couchbase, our query language is SQL++. So it combines the power of SQL with the flexibility of JSON. So developers can query modern data, actually JSON, using skills they already have. So they don't have to learn. So there's absolutely zero learning and learning that anybody needs to do. And myth three that I would rather say that it's a risky migration. And of course, it's the first thought that everybody has, that it can be risky because obviously there is a process that's been going on, and changing that would obviously get more risk involved, and what if it doesn't work, right? So but the reality, of course, is very different. We're looking at modernization, but more on an incremental pace, with zero downtime, canary rollouts, or kind of hybrid operations. So it's not about replacing relational everywhere. It's about placing the right workload basically on the right data system. And when actually the teams understand that, the adoption becomes a lot more strategic, and it's to their advantage, and it's no more a risk or a gamble for them thereafter. Just to give you a little perspective, and it's one of the most amazing use case that Couchbase has, and I assume everybody today is on LinkedIn, and they run Couchbase, as its caching and a source of truth data layer, and supporting 850 million users, 10 million queries per second, sub 4 millisecond latency. And we've actually outgrown Oracle, Memcache, and Redis, as one platform. Couchbase came in, and we're now catering to about 50 use cases across the company. So just to answer that question, we are running some of the most critical applications, and we have migrated customers from their legacy, and we've got them onto a more far a better modernized journey where they could do a lot more with the data that was sitting on legacy.
Right. Right, very. Those were some of those impeccable stats that you shared with us. So thank you for sharing those. And finally, I want to spend a quick minute on people who are usually at the heart of any change that comes in. So Santosh, how is modernization really reshaping your data teams? What skill sets are you now prioritizing for future proofing?
Well, so ours has been from, I mean, if you look at PolicyBazaar, we've been, you can call us digital natives in some ways, right? So the journey started some few years back, like 4 or 5 years back. But right now, if you look at basically the people we are trying to hire, we are trying to hire people who can actually think of data as a product, right? Somebody who can actually, who's not actually writing SQL queries, he's actually able to think through the entire, uh, conceptual concept to basically the deployment, right? So which essentially means, dealing with all the new age technologies and so on, right? For example, using cloud, using basically some of the CI/CD kind of, tools and things like that. So and of course, he needs to be also like a bridge between the business as well as the technology side. So that mind shift has actually changed from a RDBMS kind of skill set to the to a complete full stack kind of data engineer.
All
That's
right.
exactly what we're looking at.
Wonderful, wonderful to hear that. Well, we are completely out of time, but I'm going to give each of you 30 seconds to tell me, how do you see data architectures evolving in the next 2-3 years, or how modernization will really reshape your organization in any form. It could be culturally, it could be business wise. Pick any angle, pick any facet that you like, and give me a 30-second response on that. And if I can start, why don't we start with you only, Santosh?
So if I were to kind of how do I say? Basically, every time everything is moving towards basically, making it easier for the customer, right? So if I were to kind of take that angle, personalization, knowing everything about the customer, which is the, customer data platform, all of those are, big, strategy items for us. And we are moving in that direction from a data architecture and a data platform perspective.
All right, perfect. Pinak, what about you? What core principles in your architecture do you think will help sustain your future technological cycles?
So I think we need a North Star, and North Star in this case will be something that Santosh already mentioned: event-driven architecture, zero trust posture, API first, and governance as the first design principle. And secondly, we need to keep our team aligned. Somebody says, not in this panel, but otherwise, I heard culture beats architecture, right? So definitely we need to keep team aligned, no matter when the tool changes. And therefore, my principle always has been that you experiment widely, as I said, pilot widely, but then you adopt narrowly and then expand incrementally. These are the two things I would say.
All right. So culture doesn't just eat strategy for breakfast; it also beats architecture. Santosh, Nilesh, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think for us, it's really the cultural aspect is key. We spoke about getting the right talent in the engineering teams, but we're also, if you look at the various other teams outside of technology in the bank, which is the product teams, the underwriting teams, we're doing a lot of cross-pollination and getting the right data-first mindset. How do you use data to come up to solve problems as opposed to looking at it, in a more the intuition is always there, but how do you actually back that up with data? And that is in terms of being digital first, in terms of being there for customers when they need us. In terms of you spoke about GRC, that's paramount in all respects. We want to get it right by customers. That's our motto. And that's in terms of getting there. There's a cultural aspect of it, and there is the whole point about seeing how we can solve these challenges. We have a term inside, even for things like GRC, how can I get a machine readable set of controls that I can move left into my delivery pipeline. So I'm secure from the start, or I'm compliant from the start, or I'm meeting regulatory needs from the start. So we need people with that kind of mentality that we are actually hiring across all our functions to be able to get there.
All right. And final word to you, Aruj. Parting thoughts. How do you see data modernization and architectures evolving over the next 2-3 years?
Yes, Prasad. So great. I mean, the next 2-3 years, definitely a massive shift, and maybe much earlier than what we're thinking. So, I mean, for me, there are 3 shifts that I really look at, and I'm going to talk more from a database standpoint, right? First, and of course, is AI moving closer to the moment of interaction, right? It has to be real time, should be available and available to run at the edge and even on devices, right? The second shift, of course, is convergence. Why use so many technologies to just cater to a big fundamental requirement of an application? And the needs are growing. It's becoming complex. So why not have one database that could help you do caching, search engines, vector at billion scale, streaming pipelines, everything, in a single platform. And then when you find that one platform, you would obviously love to have this work across, cloud, on-prem, and of course an OEM that could support you, a hybrid architecture where you could have something on-prem and some on the cloud. And with Couchbase, whatever features that we spoke about, and there's a lot to talk about, it's available on-prem as well as on the cloud, and we do support a hybrid architecture, perfectly built, for all the elasticity, Pinag, that you mentioned in the beginning, and we do support that, from a hybrid perspective as well, and also available at the edge. So that's a bit about how I want to close this now. Thanks.
All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for this truly enriching conversation. Now, if there's one clear takeaway from today's discussion, it's this. Data modernization is no longer just a technology upgrade. It's a business transformation story. It's an agility story. And increasingly, it's an AI readiness story. To our audience, thank you very much for joining us here today. We hope this session helps you rethink how your organization approaches data, innovation, and the future of customer experience. Until next time, thank you very much for joining us. Goodbye.
Couchbase presents Futureproofing the Data Strategy in association with Moneycontrol.